In this episode of the Geodatabase Talk, we will discuss the differences between DDL and DML, data definition language and data modification language. Coming up next. But before we go into this podcast episode, if you're new to my podcast or the channel, consider subscribing. We discuss software engineering topics, we discuss the GIS topics, geographic information topics, especially ESRI technology. So if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. Consider subscribing to the podcast where we discuss cool stuff. Now, with that said, let's jump to the podcast. What's up, y'all? This is Hussein Nasser from iGeometry Podcast, and welcome to another Geodatabase Talk, where we pick a topic about the Geodatabase, the ArcGIS Geodatabase, and we casually talk about it. Today's topic is DDL versus DML. So these two acronyms are actually, if you think about it, they are database acronyms, right? We know these things. Data definition language is your alter table, things that changes your structure of the table, dropping a column, doing a system operation to your database. That's DDL, right? That's what we know. You changing the definition, you're adding a new type to your table, something like that, new column. So that's what we refer to as DDL. DML is you have an existing table and you're manipulating that table by inserting new rows, by deleting existing rows. You're not changing the schema per se of your database, but you're just modifying kind of the content of your tables. Correct? So that's DML versus DDL. Stepping it up, I wanted to talk about the DDL versus DML in the geodatabase as a geodatabase aspect, right? It's slightly an above layer. If you think about it, it's a layer above that. So semantics kind of slightly differ, right? So if I say DDL, this operation is actually, from a geodatabase perspective, it is a DDL definition, but in the database, the raw underlying database, it could be just a DML, right? So with that said, I just want to be very clear, right? When I say DDL versus DML, I'm referring to the geodatabase versus the actual database. If this is confusing, it's gonna be clear, guys, in a minute, right? So I'm gonna take this time to start clarifying what this means. All right. So when you create a feature class in your geodatabase, what we create at the backend database is as a table, right? It's nothing but a table, right, with a shape geometry and a bunch of other stuff too, right? So if you think about it, if I create a feature that translates to an insert statement to that table, right? Putting it very naively here, right? Very regimented view, but let's go. That's okay. If I delete a feature, that is the delete statement. Obviously, that depends on your versioning model that you configure your geodatabase with. We talked about versioning, not in details, but we did talk about versioning. If you have archiving, that is actually an insert and an update. So if you think about it, it's like slightly different what it means to do a DML, but that's a general. DML is like you're inserting, so still DMLs and with respect to creating features are okay. However, if you, for example, add a field, so adding a field is a DDL, correct? Whether from the database directly or from the Geodatabase, that is a DDL operation, because adding a field will require to physically adding a field to your table or to your feature class. So that's clear, correct? Nice. So there is something there. Here's an example. So we give an example of a DML, right? Creating a feature. We give an example of a DDL, which is adding a field. Here's another example of a DDL, creating the feature class, right? That's a DDL, right? So you need to have certain permission to do that, right? If I want to create a feature class, the user that is currently logged into that workspace should have the necessary privileges in the underlying database DBMS system to do that operation. Make sense? It makes sense, right? So what I'm talking about here is, when I say Geodatabase, I'm referring to the enterprise Geodatabase. So that's your Oracle or SQL Server or Postgres or DB2 or Tisa or whatever, right? So you have HANA. Is it HANA or HANA? This is like HANA. Like I was like getting confused because HANA is like, it's a name. It's a name that we have the same name in Arabic as well. HANA. We call it HANA, right? So that's why I keep saying HANA. So and people at the office keep laughing at me. So is it HANA or HANA or HANA or HINA or like multiple pronunciation for this thing, right? I'm referring to the SAP, by the way. HANA. All right, back to topic. Sorry, guys. All right, so yeah, where were we? Yes, enterprise. Yeah, adding DDL. So we had, that's another DDL. Another DDL is adding a domain, a coded value domain. So domains. We talked about domains, correct, guys? I think episode 6 or something. Go check the catalog of this. If you're on YouTube, click on the playlist and just just there you see a hashtag Geodatabase. Click on that. I'm the only one, I think, talking about the Geodatabase on YouTube. So for as of 2018 anyway, right? So you'll see that all these episodes there, and just click on the playlist. If you're in the podcast, just browse the anchor.fm/edgenasser and you'll find all these episodes. All right, so domains is a concept of a geodatabase, which gives you like a code and a description. Will allow the users to have a friendly editing experience, and instead of selecting instead of showing the user codes CA, like a state CA or AR for California or Arizona, so you can actually show them the actual text instead. Well, there's no problem with the abbreviation for states, but there are cases where you need to store the stuff as an integer, but show it that as a string, and this is where it becomes very useful. So domains doesn't exist in the database, right? It's an artifact that has been introduced with a geodatabase. Same thing to the subtypes, adding a subtype, correct? Adding a subtype. Subtypes do not exist in the database, right? So when we add a subtype or add a coded value domain or even add an entry to a coded value domain, from the geodatabase point of view, this is a schema modification DDL operation. You're changing the schema of the geodatabase. You're adding a new stuff, right? It's it's a DDL from the Geodatabase lens. While if you go down to the database, what this is actually just a simple update statement, right? Into like multiple tables. It does its thing, but it's an update statement because it's a row somewhere in the database, right? That we maintain all these domains and subtypes and the class itself, the class definition, essentially, the items table to be specific. So that's I wanted to be very clear explaining this because I want to use this episode as a prerequisite to another episode I want to discuss, which is locks, the future episode, hopefully. All right. So that's it, guys. DDL versus DML. Geodatabase versus the database. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. If you have any question, tweet me. Tweet me. Can you say tweet me? Tweet at me. Right. Tweet at me. If you're watching this from LinkedIn or YouTube, just add it in the comments. I love you. See your questions. You guys having amazing request, and I love it. Right, keep them coming. Right, and if I see something fit for this podcast, I'll talk about it. And with that said, you guys stay awesome. I'm gonna see you in the next one. Goodbye.
The podcast you just heard was published with Anchor. Got something you want to say to the creator of this show? Send them a voice message using the Anchor app, free for iOS and Android.